I think Friday's episode is setting up several major power plays at once. And what stands out to me most is how nearly every storyline revolves around leverage, secrets, and people trying to control outcomes before everything blows up. The first situation I'm watching closely is what's happening at Windermere. It looks like Lucas Jones finally succeeds in stealing the blackmail photos and negatives after using the combination provided by Pascal Leck. If that plan works, it could completely shift the balance of power in this storyline. The question is whether removing the evidence actually solves the problem or just creates a new one. Meanwhile, Sonny Corinthos appears ready to take permanent action against Jen Sidwell. However, Laura Collins seems destined to become the biggest obstacle to that plan. To me, this feels completely in character for Laura. She may despise Sidwell and want him out of Port Charles, but she has never been someone who believes murder is the answer. I was wondering if this could create another major conflict between Laura's sense of justice and Sonny's more ruthless approach. Laura will likely push for a legal solution, insisting that Sidwell belongs behind bars rather than in a grave. Another storyline that caught my attention involves Ethan Lovett and Ava Jerome. Ethan apparently approaches Ava and asks her to keep quiet about his connection to Delilah Wilson. The implication seems clear. Ava figures out that Ethan is Phoebe's biological father and realizes just how desperate he is to keep that information hidden. If there's one thing I've learned from watching Ava over the years, it's that valuable secrets rarely stay free. She may agree to remain silent, but I think she'll see this information as a bargaining chip. Ethan could be handing Ava exactly the kind of leverage she loves to keep in reserve for a future favor. Over on the family drama front, Nina Reeves is becoming increasingly worried about Willow Kane. Nina reaches out to Liesl Albrecht with what amounts to a distress call, convinced that Willow is heading toward heartbreak. From Nina's perspective, Willow is getting far too attached to Harrison Chase and putting herself in a dangerous emotional situation involving a married man. Albrecht, as usual, is expected to offer a blunt reality check. I can easily imagine her warning Nina that the consequences could be severe if this situation continues spiraling. Rather than offering comfort, Liesl will probably encourage Nina to take stronger action before the damage becomes irreversible. At the same time, Brooklyn Quartermain is launching a strategy of her own. She reportedly approaches Lucy Coe for help in derailing Willow's growing pursuit of Chase. What I find interesting is that Brooklyn and Nina may ultimately be fighting the same battle from different directions. Both women seem determined to stop Willow, even if their motivations are completely different. Ironically, their efforts may already be too late. Friday's episode is expected to feature yet another emotionally charged moment between Chase and Willow. Their connection continues to deepen, and it sounds like boundaries are becoming harder to maintain. Whether they intend to cross the line or not, they seem to be moving into increasingly dangerous territory. Part of Willow's excitement may stem from positive news regarding Phoebe's adoption situation. Alexis Davis is expected to reveal that Phoebe's biological father has surrendered his parental rights. Since Ethan is pushing for a closed adoption, Alexis will likely leave his identity out of the conversation while sharing the update. I may be wrong, but I don't think Willow's celebration is connected to Chase accepting the chief of staff position. That decision still feels unresolved, and it seems more likely that he'll want additional time to think it over and discuss it with Brooklyn first. The adoption news feels like a much more logical reason for Willow's overwhelming excitement. Then there's the mystery surrounding Liesl Albrecht. One of the biggest wildcards heading into Friday's episode is the unwelcome surprise waiting for her. I was wondering if this could be tied to the secret project unfolding at Windermere. Earlier hints suggested that Ross Cullum was searching for a possible replacement for Britt Westbourne, and that storyline still feels suspiciously unfinished. If that's where this is headed, Albrecht could find herself pulled directly into a new layer of chaos. Given her connection to Britt and her tendency to become involved in complicated schemes, she may soon discover she's standing much closer to the center of the storm than she realized. Overall, I think Friday's episode looks packed with shifting alliances, hidden agendas, and dangerous secrets. Ava gains leverage, Nina sounds the alarm, Brooklyn prepares her counterattack, and Albrecht may be on the verge of walking into a situation she never saw coming. The biggest question is whether these characters can still control events or whether the fallout has already begun. I think Jocelyn Jacks may have just made the smartest move she's made since this captivity storyline began. For weeks, Jocelyn has been throwing everything she can at the wall trying to escape. Ever since Cassius Faison, who is operating under the name Nathan West, locked her up, she has been looking for any opening that could lead to freedom. Every failed attempt has only made her situation more desperate, but I was wondering if her latest move could end up being the one that finally changes everything. At first, it looked like Jocelyn was on the verge of escaping. Unfortunately, Jen Sidwell shut that plan down before it could succeed. In fact, Sidwell came dangerously close to eliminating her altogether. The only reason Jocelyn is still alive is because Cassius stepped in and stopped things from going that far. What stood out to me, though, happened right before Jocelyn was dragged back to the hostage area. In the June 4th episode, she quietly slipped off her ring and dropped it on the floor. It was such a small moment that could easily be overlooked. But soap operas rarely include details like that without a reason. To me, that ring feels less like jewelry and more like a breadcrumb leading rescuers straight to her. The big question is who finds it first. One possibility is Lucas Jones. He's close to his niece and there's a good chance he would recognize the ring immediately. Depending on the backstory the writers decide to establish, Lucas may have even given it to her. If he stumbles across it, he could instantly realize that something is wrong and start putting the pieces together. The complication, of course, is Sidwell himself. With Pascal Leck having escaped, Sidwell is already on edge and keeping a close watch on the property. That heightened security makes it harder to imagine just anyone wandering around and finding clues. Because of that, Lucas and Carly seem like the strongest candidates to uncover the ring and realize Jocelyn is being held nearby. I may be wrong, but I don't think the writers included that ring drop moment simply for suspense. It feels like a deliberate setup for the next phase of the rescue story. If someone discovers it, the search for Jocelyn could accelerate very quickly, and that tiny piece of evidence may end up becoming the breakthrough that saves her life. To me, the ring is no longer just an accessory. It's the clue that could bring this entire hostage nightmare crashing down. I think one of the most interesting developments coming up on General Hospital is the decision to age up Scout Kane. With Kaden Brenner-Tokarski stepping into the role this July, the dynamic around Willow Kane could change in ways she never saw coming. To me, the biggest question isn't just how an older Scout will fit into the story. It's how she'll react to the version of Willow she finds when she returns. Willow had a sweet relationship with Scout when she was younger, but a teenage Scout is a completely different situation. Teenagers tend to notice things adults hope remain hidden, and I can easily imagine Scout becoming someone who sees right through Willow's carefully constructed facade. Right now, Willow has been presenting herself as the devoted wife, standing by Drew Kane as he recovers from his supposed stroke. But I was wondering what happens if Scout starts noticing cracks in that story. She may quickly realize that Willow's heart is no longer in this marriage. Willow already confessed her true feelings to Harrison Chase, admitting she doesn't love Drew and feels trapped by her circumstances. If Scout overhears a conversation like that, everything could start unraveling. A smart, observant teenager could connect the dots much faster than anyone expects. There's also the possibility that Scout becomes the person who uncovers the truth about Drew's condition. Willow's injections and the strange circumstances surrounding Drew could raise red flags. If Scout starts paying attention, she may notice details everyone else misses. I think it would be a fascinating twist if Drew somehow managed to communicate that he's in danger and Scout became the only person willing to listen. Of course, there's another possibility. Scout may not return until Drew's recovery is already underway. Willow could decide she has enough leverage and begin revering the damage, allowing Drew to improve before Scout arrives home. Even then, I don't think the danger for Willow disappears. A teenager returning to a tense household might immediately sense that something isn't right. Maybe Scout eventually figures out that Willow has been blackmailing Drew into silence following a situation that Willow herself helped create. That kind of discovery could completely transform the family dynamic and put Willow in an impossible position. In my view, everything depends on how the writers choose to portray this new version of Scout. If they make her intelligent, outspoken, and fearless, she could become one of the most compelling young characters on the canvas. After all, she is the daughter of Sam McCall, and I think many fans would expect her to inherit some of Sam's sharp instincts and determination. Whether Scout exposes Willow's secrets, challenges her authority, or simply refuses to accept the stories she's being told, I can definitely see her becoming Willow's biggest problem. The arrival of a teenage Scout has the potential to shift the balance of power in this storyline. And I think Willow may soon discover that her toughest opponent is living right under her own roof. I think this episode was less about shocking revelations and more about people trying to control situations that are already slipping out of their hands. Almost every major character seemed convinced they could manage the truth, hide the truth, or manipulate the truth. But the cracks are getting harder to ignore. The biggest surprise, at least to me, came from Ethan's conversation with Alexis. When Alexis confronted him with a photo of him and Delilah, Ethan didn't deny knowing her. In fact, he admitted they had been friends and that they had a brief relationship that resulted in Delilah's pregnancy. What stood out to me was that Ethan wasn't interested in fighting for parental rights or becoming part of Phoebe's life. Instead, he seemed determined to stay out of the picture entirely. Ethan explained that he and Delilah had planned to discuss the pregnancy, but circumstances prevented that meeting from ever happening. Now, years later, he wants Brooklyn and Chase to raise Phoebe without interference. He even offered to sign away his rights through a closed adoption. I was wondering whether Alexis would accept that arrangement so easily, but she immediately focused on protecting her clients. From her perspective, she has to consider the possibility that Ethan could change his mind one day. Ethan's insistence on secrecy was interesting, especially when Alexis hinted that someone else may already suspect the truth. That small detail feels like the kind of clue that could become very important later. Meanwhile, tensions continued to build between Brooklyn, Michael, and Willow. Brooklyn confronted Michael and accused him of pushing Chase closer to Willow. Michael rejected that idea, arguing that if Willow is spending time with Chase, it has nothing to do with him. Even so, Brooklyn clearly feels surrounded by problems she can't control. What I found most telling was how frustrated she sounded when discussing Willow. Brooklyn believes she has consistently supported Willow, only to watch Willow grow increasingly attached to her husband. Whether Brooklyn is seeing the situation clearly or allowing jealousy to influence her judgment is still open to debate, but her concerns are becoming harder to dismiss. At the same time, Michael made a move that suggests he isn't simply sitting back and watching events unfold. After Brooklyn left, he contacted his private investigator and requested more incriminating photographs. That decision immediately raised questions for me. Is Michael gathering evidence for protection leverage or something even more strategic? The confrontation involving Tracy, Chase, and Brooklyn was another major turning point. Tracy openly accused Chase of behaving inappropriately with Willow and warned that emotional boundaries were already being crossed. Chase strongly denied any wrongdoing and insisted he would never betray his wife. When Brooklyn arrived, Tracy described what she had witnessed and argued that even if nothing physical had happened, the intimacy was undeniable. Chase rejected that interpretation, but Brooklyn wanted answers. Privately, she admitted something that many viewers have probably been thinking. She has now caught Chase alone with Willow more than once, and she believes Willow clearly has feelings for him. What fascinated me about this conversation was Chase's continued defense of Willow. Every criticism aimed at Willow seemed to push him into protecting her. Whether that comes from loyalty, friendship, or something deeper remains unclear, but it certainly explains why Tracy is so convinced danger lies ahead. Then came the moment that appeared to change Brooklyn's perspective, at least temporarily. When she learned Willow had offered Chase a job, she started reconsidering some of her assumptions. She even suggested she may have judged Willow too harshly. The couple ultimately reassured each other and shared a kiss, but there was one detail that caught my attention. As Chase embraced her, Brooklyn grimaced over his shoulder. To me, that expression suggested her doubts haven't disappeared at all. She may want to believe everything is fine, but part of her still fears Tracy could be right. Elsewhere, Tracy and Michael found themselves unexpectedly aligned. Tracy complained about Willow's presence in the house and claimed she had personally witnessed Willow trying to seduce Chase. Rather than intervening directly, Michael suggested they step back and allow events to unfold naturally. His logic was simple. If Chase is really the man Tracy believes he is, then eventually Brooklyn will see it for herself. That was a surprisingly cold calculation, and I'm not convinced it will produce the outcome either of them expect. Finally, Pascal found himself facing Sunny, Laura, and Lucas. Cornered and under pressure, Pascal claimed he knew a way to save his own life. The catch, of course, was that his information would come with a price. I think that Cliffhanger may end up having consequences far beyond Pascal's immediate situation. Whenever someone in Port Charles claims to possess life-saving information, the real question is never whether they know something, it's who will pay the highest cost to learn it. Overall, this episode felt like a story about secrets, suspicions, and shifting loyalties. Ethan wants the truth buried forever. Brooklyn wants to trust her husband while fearing she can't. Tracy believes disaster is inevitable, and Michael seems content to let the situation explode on its own. The deeper these characters dig themselves into their positions, the harder it becomes to imagine a peaceful resolution. I think the Pascal situation is becoming much more complicated than it first appeared. He continues to insist that he didn't murder Marco, but at this point, nobody seems willing to simply take his word for it. Sunny, Laura, and the others make it clear that helping them bring Sidwell down is probably his only path forward. What stood out to me is that they're not exactly offering Pascal freedom. The plan still involves putting him behind bars, but they frame it as the best available option. In exchange for cooperation, Sunny promises to help him disappear afterward, offering him $50,000 and a chance to leave the country. The mayor even guarantees his safety. Even with all those assurances, Pascal seems reluctant, which made me wonder whether he's still hiding something. The most important piece of information comes when they ask about the photographs connected to Dalton's murder. Pascal reveals that the evidence is locked away in a safe at Windermere. According to him, the photographs exist only on film and there are no digital backups. That detail immediately raises the stakes. If those photos are destroyed, the evidence could disappear forever. Lucas quickly volunteers to retrieve them, provided Pascal gives him the safe combination. Pascal eventually agrees, although Lucas doesn't seem interested in bargaining over Sonny's reduced payment offer. His focus is somewhere else entirely. What really caught my attention was Lucas demanding Marco's tieback before Pascal is taken away. That moment felt deeply personal. Lucas insists on handling the mission himself because he believes he owes it to Marco. To me, that scene wasn't really about the photographs. It was about grief, loyalty, and unfinished business. Lucas appears determined to honor Marco's memory in the only way he can. Meanwhile, Jocelyn's captivity takes another dangerous turn. Just as she tries to sneak away, Sidwell catches her and orders her to drop the makeshift weapon she's carrying. She attempts to negotiate, even offering to leave his name out of everything if he lets her go. Unsurprisingly, Sidwell isn't interested. His response is chilling. When Joss points out that he can't keep her imprisoned forever, he replies that forever may not be very long from now. That line alone suggests he may already be considering a permanent solution to his hostage problem. Joss tries another angle, arguing that she's a valuable hostage. Sidwell disagrees, viewing her as more trouble than she's worth. For a moment, it looks like he's prepared to eliminate her entirely. Then Cassius unexpectedly intervenes. I was surprised by how strongly Cassius pushes back. He threatens to end his partnership with Sidwell if Joss is harmed and reminds him that he still needs his influence at the PCPD. Whether Cassius is genuinely concerned about Joss or simply protecting his own interests remains unclear, but his intervention clearly saves her life. During the distraction, Joss secretly drops her ring onto the carpet. That feels like a classic soap clue, and I have a hard time believing that detail was included by accident. Someone is almost certainly going to find it later, potentially leading rescuers directly to her location. Cassius ultimately escorts Joss away and warns her that escape attempts will only make things worse. According to him, their survival depends on her following instructions. Whether she listens is another question entirely. Back at Sidwell's place, Lucas arrives and finds him reflecting on Pascal's betrayal. Sidwell seems genuinely stunned that he never recognized Pascal's obsession. He admits he trusted him and now believes Pascal murdered his son. Lucas carefully responds that he's relieved the person responsible for Marco's death may finally face justice. I found that exchange interesting because Lucas doesn't reveal much of what he's actually thinking. It feels like he's gathering information while keeping his true intentions hidden. On the political side of the story, Willow's latest decision may create problems she hasn't fully considered. She arrives home in a surprisingly upbeat mood and explains that spending time with Chase helped her feel normal again. Given everything happening in her life, that emotional comfort is understandable. The real controversy begins when she reveals that she wants Chase to become her chief of staff. Nina immediately recognizes the potential disaster. From her perspective, the optics are terrible. Willow would be working closely with a handsome ex-boyfriend while her husband is recovering. Even if their relationship remains strictly professional, it's easy to see how others could misinterpret the situation. I think Nina raises a valid concern. Politics often revolves around perception as much as reality, and this arrangement would likely generate plenty of gossip. More importantly, Nina warns that spending so much time with Chase could create personal complications for Willow herself. Willow insists that won't happen, but soap operas rarely introduce warnings like that without a reason. Maybe I'm wrong, but the conversation felt less like advice and more like foreshadowing. The fact that Willow finally admits Nina may have a point makes me think she's already aware of the emotional risk, even if she refuses to acknowledge it openly. Overall, the episode seems to be setting up several major developments at once. Lucas's mission to recover the photographs, Jocelyn's increasingly dangerous captivity, the mystery surrounding Pascal's true role in Marco's death, and the growing possibility that Willow and Chase could find themselves drawn back into each other's orbit. All of those storylines feel poised to collide in the episodes ahead. I've been thinking about this latest General Hospital twist, and to me, the biggest question isn't whether Britt can be replaced. It's whether Liesl Obrecht could be forced into taking Britt Westbourne's place on the Cold Fusion project. From what I'm seeing, both Ross Cullum and Jen Sidwell desperately need a scientist with Britt's level of expertise to finish the project. If Britt is truly out of the picture, Liesel may be the closest thing to a perfect replacement. Not only does she have the scientific background, but she also has deep ties to Cesar Faison, a connection that could make her invaluable to whatever is really happening behind the scenes. That said, I don't think finding the right scientist is the same as finding a willing participant. If Liesel knows anything about this project's true purpose, I have a hard time believing she would voluntarily help complete it. Everything we've heard suggests the cold fusion prototype could be turned into a devastating weapon. Even if she once stood by Faison through years of chaos, the version of Liesel we know today isn't necessarily someone who would blindly follow that path again. What makes this theory interesting is the possibility that cooperation may never be her choice. I can easily imagine Cullum and Sidwell resorting to blackmail, threats, or some other form of coercion to force Liesel's hand. If Britt was really close to completing the project before her disappearance, then bringing in someone with comparable knowledge could be the fastest way to get it operational. There's also the possibility that Liesel knows more than anyone realizes. I was wondering whether Britt may have kept details of the project from her mother specifically to protect her. We know that Liesel eventually learned Britt had been pressured into working on something connected to an experimental Huntington's disease treatment, but the exact nature of the project remained hidden. Even information passed along through Nathan West's storylines never fully exposed what Britt was building. If Liesel already understands the science behind it, she could become far more dangerous than Sidwell and Cullum expect. Another detail that caught my attention is that Sidwell seemed reluctant to replace Britt at such a late stage. While Cullum appeared confident he already had someone in mind before he could explain himself, the interruption involving Joe Fitzpatrick and Pascal Leck cut the conversation short. That feels deliberate. The show may be setting up a reveal where Liesel becomes the unexpected key to the entire operation. What I find even more intriguing is the potential interaction between Liesel and Cullum. As far as we know, they have never crossed paths, yet Cullum's striking resemblance to a younger Faison has already been used to manipulate Anna Devane. If Liesel comes face to face with him, the story could open the door to an even bigger mystery. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't help wondering if the writers are building toward a shocking family revelation. Could Cullum actually be connected to Faison in some way, a brother, a relative, or something even more unbelievable? And if Liesel is ultimately forced to complete the cold fusion weapon, the real danger may not be her scientific expertise. It may be the warning she gives afterward. Instead of helping her captors, she could become the person threatening to unleash the very destruction they've been trying to control. That's why I think Liesel's involvement could transform this storyline from a simple replacement plot into one of the most explosive mysteries currently unfolding on General Hospital. When I watched Ethan's latest decision on General Hospital, I honestly felt like the story became far more complicated than a simple adoption plot. On the surface, Ethan shocked Alexis by admitting that baby Phoebe is his daughter. But to me, the real twist wasn't the revelation itself, it was what he chose to do afterward. Instead of stepping into the role of father, Ethan immediately moved toward signing away his parental rights through a closed adoption, allowing Brooke Lynn and Chase to raise Phoebe without ever knowing the full truth. The more I think about it, the more it feels like Ethan has already convinced himself there is only one possible path forward. According to Nathan Dean, who plays Ethan, the character truly believes this is the best outcome available. I think that's what makes the situation so tragic. Ethan isn't making this choice because he doesn't care. In his mind, he's making it precisely because he does. From Ethan's perspective, none of this was supposed to happen. Delilah's death left him facing a responsibility he never expected, and now he's trying to solve an impossible problem. Rather than focusing on what he wants, he's focusing on what he believes Phoebe needs most, a stable and loving home. And when Ethan looks at Brooke Lynn and Chase, he sees exactly that. They're ready to build a family and provide the kind of environment he feels he cannot offer right now. Then there's Tracy, who represents another layer of security. Nathan Dean explained that Ethan trusts Tracy completely, and I think that trust plays a huge role in his decision. If Tracy supports the adoption, Ethan sees that as reassurance that Phoebe will be protected and cared for. What really stands out to me, though, is Ethan's determination to keep the truth hidden. The obvious question is why he won't simply tell everyone that Phoebe is his daughter. Why not be honest with Tracy, Lulu, and the rest of the people who care about him? The answer seems to be that Ethan already knows what their reactions would be. Nathan Dean pointed out that Ethan has always been someone who keeps his feelings close to the vest. If he revealed the truth, he knows the questions would start immediately. Tracy and Lulu would almost certainly ask why he isn't raising his own child. They would challenge his reasoning, they would push back against his decision. There's also the emotional weight of Luke hanging over this story. Ethan understands that people could remind him how Luke never abandoned him. That comparison could force Ethan to reconsider everything. And right now he appears determined not to reconsider at all. To me, that's the most revealing part of Nathan Dean's comments. Ethan isn't searching for another answer anymore. He believes he has already found one. Whether that answer is actually the right one is another question entirely. At this point, Ethan seems convinced that removing himself from Phoebe's life is the greatest gift he can give her. His thinking is simple: complete the adoption, step aside, and trust that she will have a better future without him involved. In his mind, once the adoption is finalized, the burden of the decision disappears because he will know he acted in what he believes are Phoebe's best interests. But this is a soap opera and secrets rarely stay buried forever. That's why I can't help wondering if Ethan's plan is built on a dangerous assumption that he can walk away emotionally and that the truth will never come out. History has shown that hidden parentage stories almost always resurface eventually. If that happens, Ethan may discover that taking himself out of Phoebe's life isn't nearly as simple as he believes. For now, Ethan sees the adoption as an act of sacrifice. The question is whether everyone else will see it the same way once the truth inevitably begins to unravel. I've been noticing a funny pattern on General Hospital, and the more I think about it, the harder it is to ignore. Nina and Carly may be rivals, but they keep ending up connected to the exact same men. At this point, it almost feels like a running theme in the show. Take Franco, for example. His journey from notorious killer to redeemed good guy was one of the more unusual transformations in Port Charles. Nina bonded with him after her own struggles following her coma, and the two formed a connection that grew out of shared trauma and some truly bizarre circumstances. He protected her from Heather. They supported each other through difficult times and even pretended to have breakdowns so they could stay together at Shadowbrook. Looking back, it was an unconventional romance from the start, and it ultimately didn't survive. But Nina wasn't the only woman drawn to Franco. Carly also fell for him during the period when many believed he was Jason's long-lost twin brother. Interestingly, Franco once again found himself rescuing someone from Heather, this time Carly. Their relationship seemed headed toward a wedding, but everything unraveled when Franco discovered Carly's affair with Sonny. Instead of a happily ever after, he left her at the altar. Then there's Jax. What began as a business arrangement between Carly and Jax eventually became one of the show's most memorable relationships. They married, built a family together, and welcomed Jocelyn into the world. Yet their love story was constantly complicated by Sonny's presence in Carly's life. No matter how many times they tried to make it work, those complications eventually led to divorce. Years later, Jax returned to Port Charles and found himself drawn to Nina. At the time, she was involved with Valentin, but when that relationship collapsed, Jax became a source of comfort and support. Their romance, however, never gained much momentum. Once Nina became absorbed in the Nixon Falls storyline, the relationship quietly faded away. Of course, no discussion about Carly's romantic history would be complete without Sonny. For years, Sonny and Carly seemed destined to find their way back to each other no matter what happened. Their relationship survived countless breakups, reconciliations, marriages, and divorces. Together, they built a family and shared decades of history. Even if they never reunite romantically again, I think their connection will always be one of the defining relationships of the series. And that brings us to one of the most controversial chapters in recent General Hospital history. When Sonny lost his memory and lived in Nixon Falls as Mike, Nina discovered who he really was and chose not to reveal the truth. During that period, they fell in love. Once Sonny regained his memories, his anger toward Nina was understandable, but over time he came to realize his feelings for her were genuine. The fallout ultimately destroyed his marriage to Carly and reshaped multiple relationships across Port Charles. Another man who has been romantically linked to both women is Valentin. There was a time when Nina and Valentin looked like one of the strongest couples on the canvas. They married, faced challenges together, and fought for Charlotte's future as a family. Valentin even risked his life for Nina. Yet the foundation of their relationship cracked when his deception involving Sasha pretending to be Nina's long-lost daughter came to light. That betrayal proved too much to overcome. Carly's relationship with Valentin was something I never expected to see. For years, they were enemies, but circumstances changed, and when Carly found herself wanting revenge against Jack, Valentin became an unlikely ally. As he became a fugitive and she sheltered him, the two grew closer. Eventually, that closeness turned romantic. Whether the relationship has real staying power remains an open question. Then there's Jack Brennan. Carly appeared to be deeply invested in Jack until she discovered he had recruited Jocelyn into the WSB. For Carly, that crossed a line she couldn't ignore, and the relationship suffered because of it. Now Nina seems to be moving into Jack's orbit as well. Their interactions have created speculation that another unexpected romance could be developing. If that happens, it would continue the remarkable trend of Nina and Carly sharing major romantic connections. I may be right or wrong, but from where I'm sitting, the writers seem very aware of this pattern. Franco, Jax, Sunny, Valentin, and now potentially Jack. The list keeps growing. What started as a rivalry between two women has evolved into one of the most unusual relationship parallels on the show. The real question is whether Jack Brennan will become the latest man to join the ever-expanding club of men who have captured the attention of both Nina and Carly.